Well, I was looking through the listings on a local online auction site, and I saw a listing for a Rolleicord VB camera for parts or repair, it said. And the description went on to say this camera had shutter issues and upon inspection needs a full rebuild. Now the pictures showed a camera that was partly disassembled. So I and another interested potential purchaser contacted them again for clarification to see exactly what needed done and what was broken. And the answer was the brass adjustment pin on the escapement mechanism is broken. It's a 1mm pin used to adjust shutter timing, and also the shutter mechanism would jam, so the shutter would randomly hang and not fire. Unsure what the issue is, to be honest with you. I used to repair cameras, but that particular issue had me stumped. Would rather see this find some use than end up in the bin. Excellent case and optics, so potentially a good donor. Well, challenge accepted. I thought I couldn't let that one go by. Not once the challenge has been put there in front of me. So what did we have? We had these bits in a little container with random screws. So everything looks like it's all there. The camera itself doesn't look too bad. It's got some fairly severe Zeiss bumps on the sides, but otherwise it's very tidy. The exception is this piece here. You'll see that the top's been stoved in slightly. That's going to need some panel beating to flatten that out, get all that looking flat again. But I expect I'll be able to do that. And the shutter, well, you can cock it, but it doesn't release. There's certainly something wrong there. So I'm going to open this up, find out what's going on with that shutter, fix the shutter, go over the camera, check that everything else is working correctly, straighten up the hood, and move on. Right, to remove the shutter from this, let's have a look. I could probably remove the whole panel here and lift that off in one piece. Or I could try removing that from the back of the camera. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, I can see the retaining ring, but I don't know whether I can get to that with my tools. Let's have a quick look. Let's start with something easy. Would that fit? No, it goes over, but the size is wrong. Okay. I'll remove the front standard, I think, and move on from there. Now often there'll be shim washers under a front standard like this. So be aware of the possibility, and I can tell by the look of these screws, because some of them have got glue on them by the looks of it and some have not, that somebody's already been in this far and the screws are a bit mix and matched. Obviously there would be 4 unpainted screws in that position. Will this lift off? Yes. We've got a coupling at the top here for the mask for the viewfinder, the parallax correction mask. And oddly, that's a crosshead screw, which was not to be expected. Let's see if I have a screwdriver to do that here. It doesn't look very happy. Let's see if it'll do the job. It will. I do not think that's the original screw. However, we've got our panel off the front of the camera now. I'll put the body to one side, and there are no shims sitting on that front standard. I think this whole piece will come off if I can get a grip on it. Let's see what tools I've got. I'll find the pointed tips for this tool. I didn't need to use any fancy tools at all. I was able to get a good enough grip on this to just unscrew it with my fingers. Lift that off, and the shutter should lift out. Got a flash connection here. Certainly want that disconnected. And that screw is loose, which indicates somebody has been this far before in historically recent times. And here we have the shutter. The rear lens group is loose. Seems to be a bit of a pattern here. Shutter blades obviously oily. Diaphragm blades not obviously oily. And the front group, that's not even vaguely finger tight. Right, some small screwdrivers to get that shutter to bits. The shutter is a Synchro-Compur shutter, not significantly different from those that you'd see in a retina camera. So, a lock screw on the front there, which locks the retaining ring. Let's have the retaining ring off. And the front cover. And the speed setting ring. And the speed setting cam. I'm looking to see if I see anything unusual. Oh, and instantly I do. Look at that. Now that's not a pin broken off an escapement, but it is the lever pulled off the self timer. Let's remove that lever. Remove the internal cocking ring and you'll notice that the shutter fired. Let's take that out. Now the item of interest here is the self timer or delay action. Quite obviously that has been abused and the arm had been pulled off here. That spring is somewhat distorted. That could be entertaining, but I'll probably end up replacing that. Let's have a look at the rest of the shutter. See what happens if we cock it. Fire it. 1 second. Behaves quite well by the looks of it. The pin that I thought they might have been broken was up here. It's not broken. There doesn't appear to be a broken 1mm brass pin. I think this repair should be a doddle. Right, let's start with the dismantling process. Off with the shutter release lever. Remove the main drive cam and spring. I'm just going to look at that spring and see how tired it is. About average. It's not awful, it's not good. Those springs used to be replaced as a matter of course when servicing a shutter years ago, but there had been no new springs available anywhere for the last couple of decades. Well, not ones that I've noticed going by anyway. Let's have out this. This is the retard gear train. That screws loose. I need some pliers. Just put the screwdriver behind that so it doesn't move while I pull the spring out slightly. Out with that. Out with the pallet wheel. This screw. This spring in this case holds the B lever, and it also holds the tension back on that pin there, that pin coupling to the self timer. There's one other small spring here has to come out. So we'll just put a toothpick over that so it couldn't get away while I was unhooking it. And there's the spring. Put that to one side. That's the front of the shutter, Delta. At the rear of the shutter, what have we got here? Well, first of all, we've got a little spacer ring here, which is screwed on. Get that off. And I'll take note of this, the flat side went down against the shutter. 3 screws hold the aperture setting lever on the back of the shutter. Now that screw is a little bit unhappy looking. It means somebody's been at it with a poor screwdriver, I would say. Off with the lever, off with the spacer, off with this lever here sets the self timer or the flash sync. We're down to the basic shutter case and mechanism plate. 3 screws from the back hold the mechanism plate into the shutter case. There's our mechanism plate. Now, looking at the state of that, that looks like that's got graphite powder loose in there. It may have been flood cleaned. It looks more like graphite powder's been liberally thrown around inside there. That's not a workable answer for shutters. The graphite powder inevitably will end up on the glass of the lenses. Let's just tip this out. Here's their components for the aperture. They all look good. They're all covered in graphite. They'll have to be cleaned. The mechanism plate, the shutter blades. Shutter blades, I thought they were oily looking at those, but they're not oily, they're just covered in graphite powder. It doesn't mean that they haven't got some oil on them. You can see that that graphite powder is just sitting there loose. Three screws hold the lens tube to the mechanism plate. One of them is longer than the others, and the long screw goes through this bracket here, this bracket holding the main drive spring, and that screw is about 1/4 millimetre longer than its mates. You have to watch for that one, because if you make a mess of it, you'll be in trouble. I'm just looking at this detent spring here for the shutter. It looks a little bit distorted to me. It's sort of sticking up a bit in the air at one end. I think might have to give that a little twist, I suppose, to encourage that back where I'd like it to be. Right, well, these components just need to be cleaned, and that's spring there I'll straighten up. And number one and headline problem of the shutter is this self timer and the lever that's become detached from it. And how do you go about detaching a lever like that? Well, typically if it's forced, if somebody goes out of their way to force the self timer, that's what's going to happen. Just checking, the spring here is all cockeyed too. It's certainly not sitting correctly. I think that's past its post. That I would expect to be on the other side of that post. So this is lost at least a turn, I would think. Okay, it's lost at least a turn of tension. Yeah, I'm going to try and get this lever back in place. First I've got to get the tension back on this spring, because otherwise it's going nowhere. Okay. I should be able to turn that, but it doesn't want to turn. Right. Okay. Just crank the tension on that. Oh yeah, this thing is not stopping when it should do, because that means that this spring here has not got its proper tension either. Okay. I'd like to say this is looking very promising, but it's not. Well, that lever's back in place, but this is running down by itself. The spring on this lever is not doing anything useful. That lever's the brake that stops the pallets from running down. probably means it just doesn't have enough tension. Yeah, it does feel a bit sort of lackluster. So the question is, can I give it some more tension? Let's see. No, that's not enough. It's running down by itself still. I'll have another go at adjusting that spring. So what's happened here is that someone has pulled this arm right out and stressed the spring. So now the spring doesn't have enough tension. I'll unhook it, see if I can get it around the other side, adjust the shape of it. It might be easier said than done. Alright, I've got it disconnected from the arm, so I can rotate this spring and see what it looks like. Oh, it's just trying to figure out which end I should be bending. So that this thing has more tension. I can't get it off that shaft without dismantling the self-timer quite a long way, and they're a hell of a thing to put back together. Even this is sort of stretching it a bit in terms of things that I like to do. Yeah, this end here is certainly been straightened right out. Let's see if I can. Okay. Put the lever back out of the way. Can I get to that spring? Well, I can see it, I just don't know whether I can hook it. There it is. Okay, let's see if I've achieved anything. Yeah, look at that, it's not going by itself. Now it's working. Okay, oh, now it's not stopping. Okay, oh, that was a brief victory there. Is it still the same problem? Is it that spring? Okay. Okay, I've got to do more work on that spring. It's where it sits, the angle it sits at, it's actually catching on something else. That's preventing things from falling in here. There's just not enough tension there. Right, I'll be at that with some slightly heavier tweezers and I'll let you know when I have success. Well, this time I'm claiming victory. That seems to work fine. So the two gear trains I'm going to put in the ultrasonic cleaner while I'm working on the rest of the shutter. So I'll go and get them sorted out.